House will come back to order. This House will come back to order. Mr. Clerk, would you ring the bell? The clerk will read the caption to a privileged resolution.
Recognizing James C. Birdsong, Jr. on receiving the 2019 Albert Nelson Marquis Lifetime Achievement Award and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privileged resolution.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the privileged resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 314.
Chairman Stevens has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 314. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 314 to be titled an act to amend Chapter 7 of Title 52 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to registration, operation, and sale of watercraft.
Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nice to see such a full House here today. Want to present you for the first time in over, another decade or two, we've had banks that have been asking for a title to the boat. When you register the boat, this bill now generates a title automatically at no charge to either the customer or the state. This comes as just a matter of practice for those people that finally do your registrations for your boat. The Senate, their change was on line 79, and that change was that the 90-day requirement whenever you register your boat, they didn't feel like they could live up to that, so we took that out. But for the first time, your banks are going to have the opportunity to have a title for their boat if you will vote for this bill. Mr. Speaker, if there's no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 314, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 111, the nays are 12, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 314. We have a supplemental local calendar. We have a supplemental local calendar. One bill on the local calendar is an agree-disagree. Having received the requisite number of signatures required, the House delegation wishes to agree to the Senate substitute to the bill. Third reading and passage of uncontested local bills. If there is no objection, we will vote on the local calendar as a whole with a recorded vote. Hearing none, it is so ordered. The clerk will read the local calendar.
Senate Bill 245 by Senator Utterman of the 45th, City of Beaufort. Senate Bill 256 by Senator Jones of the 10th, City of Stockbridge. House Bill 685 by Senate Substitute by Representative Bentley of the 139th, City of Fort Valley.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on the local calendar? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall these bills now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bills on the local calendar will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of the bills on the local calendar. The ayes are 153, the nays are 0. These bills, having received the requisite constitutional majority, are therefore passed. Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask the House to agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 345.
Chairman Cooper has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 345. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 345 be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 1 of Title 42, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to inmate policies so as to provide for prohibited practices relating to a pregnant female inmate or a female inmate who was in the immediate postpartum period.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cooper to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate, in their wisdom, decided to remove all of the reporting requirements from the bill. This was because the sheriffs complained that it was just too burdensome for them to let us know how many pregnant women and how many births occurred under their watch. They left the rest of the bill intact, so it is a major step, and we will see what information we can get without this bill, and if we need to, we can come back. I would ask for your favorable vote on the Senate substitute to House Bill 345.
You have no questions? On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 345, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 152, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 345. insist and adhere and appoint. Chair recognizes Chairman Tanner for a motion.
I move that this House adhere to the House position on Senate Bill 200 and appoint conference committee.
Chairman Tanner has moved that the House adhere on its position in disagreeing to the Senate substitute to Senate Bill 200 and that a committee of conference be appointed. The clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 200 to be titled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 2, Title 32, the official code of Georgia annotated, relating to exercise of power to contract by the Georgia Department of Transportation.
Is there any objection to the motion? Is there objection? The chair hears none and the House has adhered. The chair appoints as a committee of conference Representative Tanner of the 9th, Representative Smyrie of the 135th, and Representative Knight of the 130th. Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like for this House to adhere and appoint to Senate Bill 214.
Chairman Powell has moved that this House adhere to its position on Senate Bill 214 and that a committee of conference be appointed. The clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 214 to be titled an act to amend Chapter 10 of Title 43, the official code of Georgia annotated, relating to barbers and cosmetologists.
Chairman Powell has moved that this House adhere to its position on Senate Bill 214 and the conference committee be appointed. Is there objection? The chair hears none. The chair appoints as the House has adhered. The chair appoints as a committee of conference Chairman Powell of the 32nd, Chairman Jaspers of the 11th, and Representative Lott of the 122nd. Chair recognizes Representative Carson for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move this House agree to the Senate substitute for House Bill 68.
Representative Carson has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 68. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 68 to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2A, Title 20, the official code of Georgia annotated, relating to student scholarship programs.
Chair recognizes Representative Carson to explain the Senate substitute.
Folks, this is House Bill 68. This is the same bill that we passed 170 to 1 last month. The Senate had attached some language in regard to scholarship accounts, what have you. All of that has been taken off. It has gone back to its original form. It's just 3 lines. No entity which operates, owns, or is affiliated with a subsidiary or association or organization of a accreditation agency of elementary or secondary schools is allowed to be an SSO. That's all this bill says. I'll answer any questions, Mr. Speaker.
You have no questions?
I yield the will.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute, House Bill 68. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 152, the nays are 4, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 68. Mr. Doorkeeper. Madam Doorkeeper, let me try that. Madam Doorkeeper, please admit the Honorable Brian Kemp, Governor of Georgia, to the floor of the chamber along with his staff. House will come to order. We have had a good session this year. We've accomplished things that matter a lot to a lot of Georgians. And I want to say publicly that I am grateful for and appreciate the partnership, the leadership, and the friendship that I enjoy with the gentleman to my right. Please help me welcome to this chamber the Governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp.
Thank y'all very much. Thank you. Thank you all. That is very, very kind. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be back with you. As you all know, it started here just about 40 days ago, I think it was. I just wanted to come by tonight very briefly. I know you're still very busy in the people's house, doing the people's work for our great state. And I just wanted to tell you thank you for your service, having served in the General Assembly across the hall. I appreciate y'all not holding that against me. But I know the sacrifices that you and your family have gone through to get here and what you do through this busy legislative session. I have great appreciation for each of you representing your district across our great state. It's been an honor to work with you. I just want to thank you for your service. You know, one of the things that we have to do here is to pass a balanced budget, and we have done that, and I want to thank this House for their bipartisan support on that effort, so congratulations to you all for that. I also want to thank all of the staff, our Capitol security, and others that make this place work during this busy time of year. So thank you all for your service. I also want to thank our hard-working pages that are here today. I had one down in the office earlier that said they had heard a rumor that we might finish early tonight. I told them they should not believe that rumor. I have never known that to be true. I also told somebody I think the only people that would be more excited about the legislative session being over with than me would be those hard-working folks in Legislative Council. So I appreciate their service as well. It's an honor to serve. I want to wish you the best the rest of the night. God bless you, and God bless this great state of Georgia that we live in. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate the kind words.
Chair recognizes Chairman Knight for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 323.
Chairman Knight has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 323. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 323 to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 64, Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to regulation and licensure of pharmacy benefit managers.
Chair recognizes Chairman Knight to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this was, if you'll remember, we had two PBM bills. We got the first one done, 233. This is 323, and it's basically a lot of the same language, except it's up under the insurance code. Again, I want to thank Chairman Richard Smith for his leadership. The two changes that we made, those were things that we had talked about while the bill was still over in the House, and we continued to, in good faith, to make those changes over in the Senate. The two changes, again, are tightening, are the changes tightening of the steering language, and we also had an exemption out there for limited distribution drugs that are not commonly carried by retail pharmacies or oncology clinics. So those are the two changes. And again, I want to thank this House for its support as we try to reform and look at the health care cost that is really crippling the state, but most of all our citizens. Thank you for your support.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 323, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 158, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 323. Chair recognizes Representative Vance Smith for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move to agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 516 as amended by the House.
Representative Smith has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 516 as amended by the House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 516 to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 15 and Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to professional engineers and land surveyors, so as to provide for the profession of professional structural engineer.
Chair recognizes Representative Smith to explain the Senate substitute and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 516 passed overwhelmingly. It went to the Senate. They added a substitute with a lot of additional languages, raises the cap on one of the categories. We're taking this back to the original bill that left the House, 516. What that bill does, adds two words, structural engineer, to the licensing board here at the Secretary of State's office, so that these structural engineers will have that designation when they go to bid projects. 24 other states have that designation. We want to give our structural engineers that same category. Also in this, we have 4 or 5 associations that are not overseen by the Secretary of State's office in the licensing arena. And these are different forms of kickboxing, world kickboxing. We have associations that are taking place in Georgia, and there's no oversight by the Secretary of State's office. So if something were to happen, unfortunately, and somebody get hurt, they're unsupervised. So that is the other part of this bill. I would certainly ask for your favorable consideration in this, and let's send this back to the Senate and see if we can get them to agree. If there are no questions, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the will.
Do you yield for questions?
I will. Yes, sir. One.
Chair recognizes Representative Henson to your left for a question.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. Tell me about kickboxing. Is it an agency? Is it not what kickboxing is? But is it an agency? Are you licensed? Explain what this legislation does with regard to kickboxing, please, if you can.
There are events going on in the state of Georgia, and thank you for the question. There are events going on in the state of Georgia that have no supervision as far as from the Secretary of State's office. Associations that are holding sports kickboxing, world kickboxing, United States kickboxing. They have no supervision. The Secretary of State has no control over what goes on. And for that to be happening in our state and with no supervision, and if somebody were to get hurt, I think fortunately it's a great thing to let the Secretary of State oversee these. So that's the reason we're putting that in this bill.
Further question?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you give me an example of something that does have an oversight that'd be comparable to kickboxing that's under the Secretary of State?
I would say the boxing, USA Boxing, all the different organizations that handle boxing, Golden Gloves, Amateur Athletic Union, Team Georgia Amateur Wrestling, USA Wrestling, National High School Coaches Association, all of those.
I'm sort of getting the impression that I should have read the bill before asking you these questions as you're looking at them. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Speaker, and I'll yield the will.
Gentleman has yielded the will. Is there any objection to the adoption of the House amendment? The chair hears none, and the House amendment is adopted. Is on the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 516 as amended by the House. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. What purpose does Representative Jasmine Clark rise? She waves. All those in favor of the motion are voting aye. Those opposed are voting no. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 139, the nays are 17. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 516 as amended by this House. Chair recognizes the Chairman of the Rules Committee, Chairman Powell, for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House substitute to Senate Bill 2.
Chairman Jay Powell has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to Senate Bill 2, or the Senate amendment to Senate Bill 2. All those are, I'm sorry, the clerk will read the caption. I'm trying to get us out of here quickly.
Senate Bill 2 to be entitled an act to amend Title 46 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to public utilities and public transportation so as to specifically authorize electric membership corporations and their affiliates to provide broadband services.
Chair recognizes Chairman Powell to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the EMC authorization bill to provide broadband throughout the state of Georgia. And the Senate made a few little changes, but the major change that they made is that you remember that when we were talking about cross-subsidization and the cost allocation manual, that any disputes would be in the Superior Court in the county where the EMC is located. What the Senate did was change it and make it the Public Service Commission, and that agreement is, that change is agreeable, and so I would ask that you give favorable consideration.
Do you yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Jasmine Clark to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain to me whether or not rural Georgia or underserved areas that do not currently have broadband are mentioned or are going to definitely be served with this bill?
No, ma'am. What happens is that this authorizes one of the main players in rural Georgia to provide a service that they are not legally authorized to provide now. There's no silver bullet for rural broadband, but we've set up a grant program in last year's bill. We set up a mapping program in last year's bill, and now we are authorizing the EMCs to provide this service. Earlier this session, we authorized rural telephone cooperatives to provide this service. So what we're trying to do is to break down the barriers that prevent service from being provided.
Thank you.
No further questions.
I urge your favorable consideration.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate amendment to Senate Bill 2, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 160, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate amendment to Senate Bill 2. Chair recognizes Representative Williamson for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House accept the Senate substitute to House Bill 406. I'm sorry, the Senate amendment to House Bill 406.
Representative Williamson has moved that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 406. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 406 to be titled an act to amend Title 36 and Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to local government, revenue, and taxation, respectively, so as to require joint authorities to furnish certain information necessary for the state auditor to determine the net impact of their activities.
Chair recognizes Representative Williamson to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you'll recall, House Bill 406 was an effort to have transparency and reporting requirements by joint development authorities that are owned by more than two or more counties. The Senate did add a friendly amendment that clarifies that these reports are not due unless revenues are actually coming into those jointly owned authorities. So it's a paperwork reduction act, amendment, if you will. So be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions.
Yield the will.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 406, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 155. The nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 406. Chair recognizes Representative Holcomb for a motion.
I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282.
Representative Holcomb has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 282 to be titled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 5 of Title 17 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to investigation of sexual assault.
Chair recognizes Representative Holcomb to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the legislation that will extend the period of time in Georgia that we will preserve evidence in sexual assault cases. It is supported by prosecutors, defense attorneys, as well as advocates of those who have survived sexual violence. I'd like to thank Senator Untiman, who carried this bill in the Senate, where it passed 55-0, and I'd appreciate your favorable consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282, all those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 156, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 282. Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask this House to agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 307.
Chairman Powell has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 307. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 307 to be titled an act to amend Chapter 10 of Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to magistrate courts so as to provide for jurisdiction of such courts.
Chair recognizes Chairman Powell to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 307 was a bill that we passed earlier in the session, and at that time I had explained the complications of this bill, and also I had explained that after 30 years of working on non-consensual tow legislation on motor vehicles, that we'd been putting Band-Aids and patches on this camel for years. And this thing had gotten into such an untenable situation that it had gotten into the public safety issues of these non-consensual tows. The towers that are regulated by public safety, they're ordered to pick up these vehicles when they've been derelicts that's been left and things like that. And this thing had gone on for so many years that it was just a miserable process because the Georgia Constitution, different than our surrounding states, does not allow for non-judicial foreclosure on these vehicles. So what you've got is you've just got tons and tons of these vehicles that are languishing around in their yards around the state. So we attempted this year and called in an awful lot of good help to try to get the legalese out of the way, because this, quite frankly, dealt with the magistrates, 159 different magistrates, dealt with the tours in all of these districts, and that was to create a pathway so that they could actually go through the process of getting a foreclosure on a vehicle that they can't find the owner to. And the process, it remained fairly well the same. In the first 2 or 3 days after they picked up a vehicle, they'd have to notify law enforcement so that they're sure it wasn't on the stolen list. At that point, they had the next 3 or 4 days that they could, or up to 5 days, that they then sent out a notice, and they got the address of the last owner of record of the lien holder, up to 15 days, and then they served notice, sent a written notice to that owner or lien holder of record. If that person was unknown and it was not returned, then the language that was worked out with the magistrates was that they could then place an ad in the local newspaper or the legal organ. After that period of time, then they could file a lawsuit for foreclosure. If the person or the entity did not come forward, then they could seek the foreclosure, and it just goes on and on. It's a full-fledged process. And what this has done, it has trimmed it down from probably 90 to 100 days to probably roughly 60 days for this process. I would tell you that there's several folks that I'd like to give a lot of credit to. I don't give a lot of credit from time to time to a lot of the senators over there, but I do give a lot of credit to the Senate Judiciary Committee and their chairman and some of the members that worked on this. Also to the towers, to the salvage dealers, to the repair facilities, the magistrates, the magistrate judges, the Department of Revenue, credit unions, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Public Safety, the Sheriff's Association, the GBI, Technology Access Record Divisions, insurance industry. We brought them all into this bill to try to get this thing cleaned up, and that's what you have before you, ladies and gentlemen. And I would certainly ask for your consideration, for a favorable consideration for the Senate amendment, the Senate substitute to 307.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and ladies
On the
and gentlemen.
gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 307, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 156, the nays are 1. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 307. Chair recognizes Chairman Ron Stevens for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 525.
Chairman Stevens has moved that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 525. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 525 to be entitled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 7, the Title 50, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to Georgia International and Maritime Trade Center.
Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we passed out earlier House Bill 525, which simply changes the Georgia International and Maritime Trade Center Authority to the Savannah Convention Center Authority, both are statewide authorities. What the Senate did is they assigned, for administrative purposes only, the Department of Economic Development and the Attorney General to provide legal services. That's all they did, Mr. Speaker, and I'll ask for your favorable support. And no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions. On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 525. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 153, the nays are 3. This House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 525. Chair recognizes Representative Reeves for a motion. Chair recognizes Chairman F. Strachan for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 70.
Chairman F. Strachan has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 70. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 70 to be entitled an act to amend Title 29 of the official code of Georgia Annotated relating to guardian and ward so as to revise provisions relating to guardians and conservators of minors and adults.
Chair recognizes Chairman F. Strachan to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This measure passed the Senate 51-0. It was unanimous. The bill, as you'll recall, is updating the Guardianship Code, and really 3 changes were made. First of all, Section 1 was removed from the bill. That had been added in the House, and all parties involved were in agreement with that. Also, there was some cleanup language with respect to 29-9-3B, and the effective date was updated to January of 2020 so that if there are any guardianship proceedings currently pending, they wouldn't be impacted by the effective date. Would ask for your favorable consideration. I'd be happy to answer questions. I'll yield the well.
On the gentleman's motion, all those in favor of agreeing to the Senate substitute to House Bill 70 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 155, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 70. Chair recognizes Chairman McCall for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 322, please, sir.
Chairman McCall has moved that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 322. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 322 to be entitled an act to amend Title 36, the official code of Georgia Annotated relating to local government so as to change provisions relating to the advertisement of certain bid or proposal opportunities.
Chair recognizes Chairman McCall to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 322 passed out of here unanimous. It adjusts the threshold for local governments on bids from 10,000 to 100,000. GMA, ACCG, contractors. I don't know of anybody that's against the original version. The Senate monkeyed with it a little bit and added some language in that deals with Dalton utilities. and I just want to agree to it and get this over with, and I would love for you to tell me that I ain't got no questions.
Kent, you have a question. You do. He says he'll take one. Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just so I'm understanding 100% clearly, the Dalton language has or has not been removed from this particular bill that we're about to vote on?
It's in it.
The Dalton language is in the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all. I appreciate you voting green.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 322, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Where we at? What purpose does Chairman Houston rise?
Parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Speaker, is this a bill that we had come through Ways and Means last year that did not get out of Ways and Means?
I don't recall.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that we've been real cautious about things that got out of Ways and Means, and this did not go through Ways and Means?
I know you're real cautious about what goes through Ways and Means.
Thank you.
What purpose does Representative Ridley rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is this not the bill from Dalton Utilities as a local delegation bill that I wouldn't sign, so they turned it into a general bill that does away with the voters' rights to vote for their local electric corporation to borrow money for Point Vogel? I
seem to remember hearing something about that bill. What purpose does Representative Carpenter rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I represent 93% of those voters and I feed 1,200 of them a day, so I know what my voters do and do not want?
I'm sure the gentleman believes that to be correct. What purpose does Representative McLaurin rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State
Speaker.
your inquiry.
Isn't there a bit of an analogy between how this almost slipped through and then how removing a referendum would allow Dalton Utilities to take actions that are actually against the will of their people?
I'm sure the gentleman believes that to be true. What purpose does Chairman Houston rise?
Well, isn't it not true that people need to everybody has a right for their vote to be heard?
I agree with that.
Thank you.
What purpose does Representative Carpenter rise?
Parliamentary
State
inquiry.
your inquiry.
Is it not true that my voters are the only voters in the state of Georgia that have to do this?
I'm sure the gentleman believes that to be true. All right, last one here, Representative Ridley. What purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that the reason the voters have to do this is because the Dalton Utilities does not have to report to the PSC in order to raise rates, and that's what the voters are there to do? And if you take this off, then it gives them freedom to not have voters or not have to report to the PSC?
I'm sure the gentleman believes that to be true. What purpose does Chairman Parsons rise?
Yes, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that this part of this bill that relates to Dalton allows Dalton to use the same process that the MEAGs across the state use for to do the same thing?
If the gentleman so states, I'm sure he believes that to be true. All right, those in favor of the bill or the motion are voting aye. Those opposed are voting no. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the motion, the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 91, the nays are 69. This House has agreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 322. What purpose does Representative Ridley rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
And do a reconsideration on that vote.
It is immediate. But you have to make a motion.
I make the motion. I move to make the motion that we reconsider.
Representative Ridley has moved that the House reconsider its action in agreeing to the Senate amendment to House Bill 322. All those in favor of reconsideration will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion that this House reconsider its action in agreeing to the Senate substitute or Senate amendment to House Bill 322, the ayes are 83, the nays are 78, and this House has failed to reconsider. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. The House has reconsidered. So, because it's day 40, we voted again. Now, all those in favor of the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate amendment to House Bill 322 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Chairman Dollar rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that when HB 322 left this House, it went unanimously?
I don't recall. I'm sure
That's my understanding, Speaker. Further inquiry?
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that the language that is added to this bill passed out of the Energy Committee with one no vote?
I wasn't there, but I'm sure the gentleman was and knows whereof he speaks. Okay, have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 84, the nays are 74, and this House has disagreed to the Senate amendment to House Bill 322. Chair recognizes Representative Reeves for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 472.
Representative Reeves has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 472. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 472 to be titled an act to amend Chapter 11 of Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating the general provisions of the Juvenile Code so as to revise procedures concerning removal considerations.
Chair recognizes Representative Reeves to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If everybody is still confused from that last vote, this one's really easy. This is a defects bill I carried earlier this session, passed unanimously, and the Senate substitute is the actual same exact bill that this House passed unanimously. It just, at one point, they added some other bills, and then those bills were taken off, and so it has a new LC number, but otherwise it's the same bill. I'll be happy to yield for questions.
You have no questions?
Yield the well. Thank you.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 472, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 160, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 472. Chair recognizes Chairman F. Stration for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 239 as amended by this House.
Chairman Elstration has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 239 as amended by this House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 239 to be titled an act to amend Title 15, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to courts so as to establish a Georgia business court.
Chair recognizes Chairman Elstration to explain the Senate substitute and the amendment.
The House Bill 239 as amended by this House that's before you is virtually the exact same language as the conference committee report to Senate Bill 110, which you already voted on earlier today. The only exception is that for original filing in the statewide business court or for transfers to the statewide business court, there would be a period of time in which the other party, could object, and therefore the matter wouldn't be before the business court. It would be in a normal state or superior court where it should be otherwise. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Is there any objection to adopting the House amendment? The chair hears none, and the House amendment is adopted. On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 239 as amended by this House, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 120, the nays are 40. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 239 as amended by the House. Chair recognizes Representative Nulowitz for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we agree with the Senate substitute for House Bill 454.
Representative Adulowitz has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 454. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 454 to be titled an act to amend Title 40, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to motor vehicles and traffic, so as to provide for the operation of motorized mobility devices.
Chair recognizes Representative Anulowitz to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, everyone. I'm presenting this on behalf of Chairman Tanner this evening. This is House Bill 454. It is an agreed-to legal framework for electric bicycles in Georgia. It is the result of collaboration on the part of ACCG, the Georgia Municipal Association, the micro-mobility industry, and the bicycle manufacturers all agreed to support this language. It passed the Senate 54-1 just a few moments ago, and I would appreciate your favorable consideration. Thank you.
You have no questions?
Thank you.
On the lady's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 454, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 135, the nays are 20. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 454. Chair wants to take just a moment here and ask you if you would help me thank people without whom we could not do this job. They work hard, and we are very blessed to have their services. First of all, the House Budget Office, Director Martha Wigden, Deputy Director Christine Murdoch, and all of the staff. House Media Services. She's standing up here to my left. Betsy Thoreau and her staff. The House Interns and House Legislative Internship Coordinator, Michelle Sloan. The IT Department, Director Gordy Rivers, Assistant Director Michael Bottoms, and their staff. The Reapportionment Office, under Director Gina Wright and her staff. The HR Director for the General Assembly, Donald Cronin. And I want to give a very, very special thank you to individuals who are here all year long. And they have a special place in my heart, and I hope yours. The GBI, the Georgia State Patrol, and the Capitol Police officers. The House Post Office, under Director Corey Mulkey. We have another group that we want to express our appreciation to quickly and get them back to work. The Office of Legislative Counsel under Director Rick Ruskell. Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to agree to the Senate substitute to Senate Bill 9.
Okay, we're still taking up business here. But we're not going to be taking up any if people can't hear or see. Chairman Setzler has moved that this House agree to the Senate amendment to Senate Bill 9. The clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 9 to be entitled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 3 of Chapter 11 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, relating to invasion of privacy so as to